Hi folks, I'm going to review with you now the second short case question, which is based on the situation that we described to you earlier, a company needing to hire sales reps and in that case also production supervisors. So this second little short case question more fully describes the situation regarding the production supervisors that they need to hire. So we know that there's a new facility that's opening up in January 2010. It's going to have state-of-the-art technology. The production manager is going to be responsible for working with you as the HR person to hire some new supervisors. And because you were sick on a particular day that they were going to do some screening, that this supervisor decided he'd go ahead and do it himself. So by telephone, he interviewed somebody by the name of Margaret Day. She had a lot of experience in a production environment supervising employees. And Jim thought it was rare that a female would have a role in a company supervising production employees. So he thought, just to be sure, he wants her to take a personality test to make sure he could feel comfortable with her supervising factory workers, and she agreed to take the test. It also says here that during the telephone screening process, Jim kind of laid down the law to Margaret to say she wouldn't be shown any favors, has to pull her weight. She'd be the only female supervisor, and hopefully her husband wouldn't mind that. Also told her that she wouldn't be shown any special favors, like leaving early to pick up sick kids or picking them up from school early. And when you returned, you found out that Jim hired his supervisors, and Margaret Day, unfortunately, didn't get hired. Phoned you, said that she understood that she wasn't hired, but she was asked to undergo a personality test, and she also knew that the people that were hired all had less experience than she did. Another issue was also brought to your attention as the new supervisors started their first day on the job, and Jim met with you, told you that one of the new supervisors is a practicing Muslim, and asked your permission for a 15-minute break at sundown to pray, and Jim refused that request to pray. So the first question we're asking you here is, do you think that Margaret was fairly treated? And whatever you think, tell us why. Well, fact is, no, she was not fairly treated because, first of all, she was the only applicant that was asked to take a personality test. That's illegal. And because you have to do a test that everybody has to take. You can't test, if you're going to test somebody, you're testing them on things that are relevant to the job, right? So everybody should have that test, not just one person. She was also asked an illegal question on how her husband would feel if she was the only female supervisor hired. So again, she shouldn't be hired based on what somebody, based on her marital status, in other words, right? And 3 people were all hired with less direct experience related to the job. So I would say, unless you have a really good reason, you would need to be hiring her. So what were 2 weaknesses now in the selection process? Well, first of all, there was no HR person present, and we said earlier that it's pretty important to have an HR person there to make sure that the interview is not, it's fair, okay, and it's balanced, and that you're not asking any illegal questions, as Jim did. There doesn't appear to be a selection process in place. So was there a reference check? Was there a panel interview? Was Jim the only person doing this? Did he do it just based on a phone interview? Did he interview anybody? And the other issue, now we're only asking for 2 issues, but I'm giving you 3 here. There's human rights issues because there was intentional discrimination because Margaret was the only one tested. And again, reasonable accommodation. Jim insinuated that Margaret wouldn't be accommodated if she had childcare issues. And we've already discussed that one of the things we're doing here in Ontario is we're putting in legislation to deal with those things so that people can be accommodated. So again, Jim would have to prove that the company is undergoing undue hardship financially, okay, if he intended to make a case of for not hiring her or not saying he couldn't accommodate her. So if this was brought to the Human Rights Commission, they'd say, well, what kind of undue hardship would you have experienced, that you wouldn't accommodate her? Would you be shut down? Would you be going out of business? No, you wouldn't. So again, he really has no basis. It's really discriminatory. So now, the other question we ask here, as an HR professional, what advice would you give to Jim on hiring the new supervisor who's a practicing Muslim who requested time off to pray? Well, again, under the Human Rights Commission, that's discriminatory. Employees are allowed to observe religious practices unless, again, it would cause undue hardship in the workplace. This guy was only asking for 15 minutes, so there's no way you're going to be able to prove undue hardship. So what you'd need to do here is the HR department would tell you, you need to maybe give a modified break policy. Maybe he has to have his break at the time he has to pray. Right? But he's still not getting something that somebody else wouldn't get. He'd just have to do it on his break. Maybe flexible hours, and you need to make sure that you provide an area for devotions. We have one at Mohawk College. We have an area for people who need to pray, that kind of thing. We have that in A-Wing. So the idea is that there needs to be some accommodation made. The other thing is maybe he does it on flexible hours. So maybe he has to take 15 minutes off at that time, and maybe after he finishes praying, he has to make that time up at the end of the shift. So those are the kinds of things that you could do to accommodate. Now, if you want to know more about that, I'll just take you to this link here. It's to the Ontario Human Rights Commission, and you can see it's a religious fact sheet, and you can see here it says that where a rule conflicts with a religious requirement, there's a duty to ensure that individuals are able to observe their religion. Right? And specifically, unlawful discrimination because of religion includes refusing to allow individuals to observe periods of prayer at specific times during the day. So the idea is you are discriminating against this guy and you can't do that. All right? So you have to make an accommodation. So that concludes our video, and hopefully you found this little review helpful.